Welcome, Mercy Hill. Glad that you're joining us, whether you're joining us online or at one of our campuses. I want to personally wish you guys a Happy New Year. I trust that you had a Merry Christmas, and I trust that you had a Happy New Year as well. I know that this year, things look a little bit different as it relates to probably your Christmas celebrations and maybe your New Year's Eve celebrations. Traditionally, I know that many of us, we probably like to host around this time of year. We like to have people over the house. I know it's probably a little bit different this year, but back in the day when we used to host people, I think about my family, we loved to host people over at the Dager household. And one of the things I've noticed about myself as a host is that I'm the one that's struggling to sit down. So I'm kind of frantically running around the house as people are coming over and as we have guests in the home. I'm kind of the Martha. I'm the one that is trying to run around and refill everyone's drinks and make sure everyone is taken care of. And so let me paint the picture for you real quick. Okay, this is the kind of person that I am when we're hosting people in our home. I'm the type of person that, I'm running around so much that I start to get some serious back sweat. I don't know if that's ever happened to you before. And so, man, I'm running around and I think, man, I maybe need to go change my clothes. Not because I spilled something on them, but because I've literally sweat through my pants. That's sometimes a problem I have because I'm frantically running around in that way. I don't know if this has ever happened to you before. I promise you this is true. So I'm so frantic sometimes when it comes to hosting people in our home that I'll at one moment remember oh man, I need to pee. I need to go to the bathroom. And then I'm so busy running around trying to do stuff for other people that 2 hours later I'm like, oh man, I really have to pee now. I totally forgot that I had to go to the bathroom. I don't know if that's you. I don't know if you understand or you can relate to that idea of being frantic. But what I realize when I think about myself as it relates to hosting people and having people in our home is this, that I'm in danger of missing the relationship for the responsibilities. I know this to be true of myself, that I am in danger of missing the people that are right in front of me, that are sitting in the chairs in my home for all of these duties and responsibilities of hosting people in our home. I know that that's true of me, but here's the harder truth that I've come to learn about myself and to realize is that the way that I am when company is over, the way that I am when we are hosting people in our home, I think for me, a lot of times is a picture of how I am as a disciple. See, too often I miss the relationship. I miss Jesus, who is right in front of me, the person who's sitting right in front of me for all these Christian responsibilities that are around me. More often than not, I'm looking in the Bible for all the things that I'm supposed to do for God instead of realizing that God is inviting me to just be with Jesus. And I think for us, maybe this time of year, around the new year, maybe this amplifies this tendency in all of us as we're thinking about New Year's resolutions and all these things that we want to do. We think about the house projects that we want to accomplish, the exercise that we want to begin doing, the food that we want to stop eating, the people that we want to invite over and do, and the list goes on and on and on. And of course, these are not bad things. In fact, many of the things that we're going to try to set out, hopefully to do this year in 2021, these New Year's resolutions are not bad things. But I think a lot of times what we have to realize is that before we are human doings, we are human beings. So we're going to turn to the book of Hebrews today. So if you have your Bible, a copy of Scripture, go ahead and turn to Hebrews chapter 1, because here's what Hebrews chapter 1 is for us as we think about this idea of doing over being. And then being, rather one that we want to be over doing. As we think about this, Hebrews 1 is an invitation at the start of this new year to simply be with Jesus so that we can behold him. To just be with him. Before we start doing a bunch of things for Jesus, what if we just sat and we were with Jesus? For some of you, you realize maybe you're here. Maybe you're joining us for the first time and you realize that you've never actually believed in Jesus. You've never beheld him as Lord and Savior of your life. Well, I want to say what Hebrews is going to tell us today is the same is true for you. No amount of trying harder this year, no amount of cleaning yourself up, trying harder to be a better person is going to give you and satisfy that feeling that you are chasing after. Hebrews 1 is an invitation for you too, to see what you are really longing for, and to see that what you're chasing after, that is only found in Jesus. So let me ask this right at the outset of this year, how might this year look different? Regardless of whatever circumstances you find yourself in, whatever life situation you find yourself in at the start of 2021, how might this year look different if we truly prioritized being with Jesus before we started doing things for Jesus? So that's what Hebrews 1 is going to show us. Let's go ahead and dig in. Hebrews chapter 1. I'm going to read the first 4 verses. Let's read those together. Hebrews 1 says this: long ago, at many times and in many ways, God spoke to our fathers by the prophets. But in these last days, he has spoken to us by his Son, whom he appointed the heir of all things, through whom he also created the world. He is the radiance of the glory of God and the exact imprint of his nature. And he upholds the universe by the word of his power. And after making purification for sins, he sat down at the right hand of the Majesty on high, having become as much superior to angels as the name he has inherited is more excellent than theirs. So here's the big idea as it relates to what we're reading about here in Hebrews chapter 1. Jesus is better. The rest is just details. Jesus is better. The rest is just details. So here's what I want to do. I want to look at, what does that mean? What does it mean that Jesus is better? And then we'll go ahead and close out our time by looking about, what does that mean for me? How do I apply that? What does that actually mean in my day to day? All right. So what does it mean that Jesus is better? What does it mean that Jesus is superior? The first thing I want to see before we go anywhere is this idea. It says in Hebrews 1 that God spoke. In fact, if you have a copy of Scripture, or even if it's in your Bible app, I want you to circle those 2 words. Those are very important. God spoke. Let's not be quick to forget that we serve a God who is not silent. We serve a God who has revealed himself to us. The God of the universe, the God who created everything, spoke to us. And so it says that God previously spoke to the prophets, and in a variety of different ways. That means that the previous revelation that God gave to us, it was fragmented. It kind of came in bits and pieces, and it came to the people by the prophets. Think back to the Old Testament and the different ways that God spoke to his people through the prophets. You think about Moses. You think about the way that God spoke to Moses. God spoke to Moses through a burning bush. Or you think about the prophet Elijah, when he was in the cleft of the rock and God spoke to Elijah through a still small voice. Or you think about Isaiah when he's in the temple and God gives him this vision. That God spoke to these prophets, and these prophets then spoke to the people. But the writer of Hebrews says that God has given us a new revelation. This new revelation is similar, but yet it is very different. See, it's similar in the fact that it is a continued revelation of God's message. It's not a new message. It's the same message, but rather it is a new medium. It's not through the prophets. It's different in that it's not fragmented. It's not through a third party. It is complete, and it is spoken directly by God through his Son. It is complete. We have the whole revelation. I think about when my kids were little, my older 2 in particular, our first copy of the Jesus Storybook Bible. It's a Bible that we use in our kids' ministry, and it just kind of goes through the Bible. It's very gospel-centered, talks about how all of the Bible points to Jesus. And we had our first copy, and over time, because little kids love to rip pages and eat books, I'm not really sure why they like to do that, but they do that. Over time, this Jesus Storybook Bible got pretty tore up. And so we'd be sitting at bedtime, and I'd be reading my older 2 kids, just kind of our quiet time, our devotional time together. And, we'd get to, let's say like the story of Jonah. And we'd be reading it, and I'd realize man, we're missing a page here. And so I realized I got to kind of make up the rest of this story. I'm a pastor. I got to make sure my kids know I know the Bible. And so, kids, yeah, okay. And Jonah, he got swallowed by a fish, and he died. Yeah, I know. It's a pretty bad story. And well, then we get a brand new copy of the Jesus Storybook Bible, and I realized, man, Jonah didn't die. No, Jonah was alive. Okay, and now I say that a bit tongue in cheek, but what I realized when we got the new Bible is you get to see this new beautiful Jesus Storybook Bible with all the pages there. Nothing is torn, nothing is ripped. It was complete. That's the type of message that we have from God. The writer of Hebrews says that God has spoken to us through Christ. He has given us a complete and direct revelation of who he is and what he has done for us. But here's the thing. If God has spoken, are we listening? That's the question we have to ask ourselves. If God is speaking, if he has spoken to us directly, are we listening? So I think a lot of times in our life, we have maybe not postured ourselves in a way to hear from God. Maybe that's because we have a crowded calendar. I know in 2020, there was a lot of things that got taken off the calendar. Maybe you're excited about putting a bunch of things back on the calendar in 2021, but I would say maybe the best to-do that you could do this year is to start creating a stop doing list. To make your calendar less crowded so that you could physically posture yourself in order to hear from God. But maybe it's not a crowded calendar. Maybe you realized that even though a lot of things have been taken off the calendar, you still have a crowded mind. Maybe worry, fear, anxiety, they have kind of gripped you over this last season of life. And you have a crowded mind, and it has crowded out your ability to hear from God. See, the question is not, has God spoken, but rather, have we postured ourselves in a place to hear from God? So, if God has spoken, what is he trying to get us to hear? What is he trying to get us to see about this idea that Jesus is better? Well, the writer of Hebrews here, he's going to make 7 statements in these verses. And I want to walk through these 7 statements to see exactly what does it mean that Jesus is better. The first statement is this: Jesus has been appointed, it says, the heir of all things. Jesus is the heir of all things. I think about back in quarantine last year when we were binge watching. Our binge watch was Downton Abbey. So full confession there, that's what we watched all those seasons in about 3 weeks. And it was interesting because this idea of being the heir, that's kind of what the whole show is about. It just kind of took on new flesh, new meaning for me, this idea that all of the stuff, the houses, the monies, the titles, all of it is yours. You inherit all of it. And that's what the Bible says here. Jesus gets it all. He's the heir of all things. He's the one who it's all coming to. One commentator said it this way. He said, this is a title of dignity, and it shows that Christ has the supreme place in all of the mighty universe. I think this is so timely for us. We have to remember, and we have to believe deeply, that this is not the president, it's not any world leader. They're not the one who has the supreme place. Jesus is the one who has the supreme place. Always has been, certainly is today, and it always will be. Jesus is the heir of all things. But next it says that through Christ, the entire universe was created. Colossians 1 says, for by him all things were created in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities, all things were created through him and for him. I don't know if you guys saw this last year, but back in the beginning of 2020, SpaceX, which is Elon Musk's company, they actually launched a spaceship up to the International Space Station. It was actually the first time in a decade that the United States had launched U.S. astronauts from U.S. soil. And you think about that, you think, man, that's a pretty incredible feat. Taking human beings and launching them thousands and thousands of miles up into outer space. That's pretty awesome. It's a pretty amazing thing. But then you realize that there are 50 billion galaxies, probably more. And God is the one who created all of them by the word of his mouth, by Jesus, through Jesus. I think nothing helps us to come to terms and to embrace our limits more than the recognition that we are created and that God is the creator. So how do we find peace amidst the chaos of our life? How do we fight the stress in our life? How do we find and grow in contentment? We do that by embracing our limits. God, you are the creator. I am the created one. God, you never sleep. I can't seem to go a day without being tired. God, you know all. I can't remember where my car keys are. God, you need nothing. I can't go a day without coffee. The next thing that it says about Jesus is this: Jesus is the radiance of God's glory. Jesus is the radiance of God's glory. That means that in Jesus, we have the presence of God. We talked about this in our Christmas series. Emmanuel, God with us. I think we have to remember that even if we don't feel like he is, that God is not distant, that God is near, and Jesus is our ever-present reminder of God's ever-present presence. I love what Psalm 139 says. It says, "Where shall I go from your spirit? Or where shall I flee from your presence? If I ascend to heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in Sheol, you are there. If I take the wings of the morning and dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea, even there your hand shall lead me, and your right hand shall hold me." Jesus is the radiance of God's glory. The next statement says that Jesus reveals to us the nature of God. Hebrews is showing us Jesus reveals to us the very nature of God. Jesus is the exact expression of God. He's the perfect expression. In fact, another translation says he bears the very stamp of God's nature. So that means to see Jesus is to see God. To hear Jesus is to hear God. Y'all, God is not a mystery to us, nor does he want to be. He has revealed himself through his Son. Here's what that means, that God desires that you and I know him. He desires that we know him. We can behold him. We can be with him because he wants that for us. He has made himself known for us to behold. He is the nature of God. The writer then goes on in Hebrews to say this. The next statement is that Jesus sustains all things. Jesus sustains all things. Don't think, when you think about this idea of sustaining all things, I don't want you to get the image of Atlas. You know, Atlas kind of struggling to hold up the world. That's not Jesus. Jesus is not sitting under the world or the universe struggling to hold it up, but rather the image is more that Jesus is carrying it along. He is moving it towards a goal, bringing it towards a goal. It says all things. That means that there's nothing outside of Jesus' sustaining control. And it says by his powerful word. That's the Greek word dynamis or dynamite. The word is not empty. Jesus' word has force. It does things. So God is not sitting idly. He is moving. He is working. He is bringing about change. So can we just for a second sit in that truth? As we start off this year, can we just sit in the truth that God is in control of everything, that we are not in control of anything, and that is really good news. Let's just sit in that for a second. Now, I didn't say that wasn't scary, but it certainly is good news. I know for many of us, this past year, God has been maybe stripping us, shattering the illusion that we have that somehow, some way, we are in control. And maybe he's put us face to face with this truth that we are not in control of anything, that he is in control of everything. I think of just my own life and what God has been doing with me in the past 8+ months, thinking about through the pandemic, just this idea of realizing, God, no, you are in control. And the way I kind of have visualized it in my own life is this idea of clenched fists and open hands. I thought there's been many times where I've said, okay, God, you know what? Boom, it's all yours. My life is yours. My family is yours. My vocation is yours. God, it's yours. And then something starts to not go the exact way that I think it should go, and as immediately as I open my hands, I begin to clench my fists. And I say, no, I want that back. Open hands, clenched fists. God stripping us of this illusion that we are in control. And like I said, for the past 8 months, I have clawed and scratched to regain control of a life that I never had in the first place. But God, in his grace, I think he's continued to show me and remind me that there is nothing that is outside of Jesus' sustaining control, and Jesus' powerful word will bring about change. And let me just say this, there is freedom on the other side of this transformative work. What freedom there is to embrace that reality that you are not in control of anything and that God is in control of everything. The next statement is this, that Jesus came to deal with the problem of man's sin. This is really at the heart of what the writer of Hebrews is getting at, not just in these verses, but is in his entire book. The writer of Hebrews, I think, is really interesting. He uses a variety of different terms all throughout the book of Hebrews to talk about what Jesus has done in regards to sin. You think, well, why is that? Why does he use a variety of terms? Why doesn't he just use the same term? Well, I think he uses a variety of different terms in order to show us that sin is complicated. Sin is multifaceted. Sin is all-encompassing. Well, okay, then what exactly is the writer of Hebrews trying to get us to see by that? He is trying to get us to see that whatever had to be done about sin, Jesus did. Jesus has done it. He used the word purification here in Hebrews 1. Purification implies the removal of sin, which also implies the defilement of sin, that sin stains. I was reading recently in the book of Ezra chapter 6, where they're reopening the temple, and they have this huge ceremony to celebrate the reopening of the temple. And it's this crazy description of all of these animals, hundreds and hundreds of animals that were sacrificed. You just think about that. Hundreds of animals, which probably amounted to gallons of blood. And you read this and you're like, man, isn't this excessive? Like, isn't this a little bit too much? And then you realize, no, it wasn't excessive enough. See, it wasn't until the very Son of God shed his blood that the stain of sin would ultimately be removed. The last statement is this: Jesus sat down. He is now seated at the right hand of God. Jesus sat down. Christ sits in the highest seat of honor. Why? Because Jesus is better. The work is done. Jesus sits down because the work is finished. This leads us, I think, really well into our application, which is this: be with Jesus and behold that he is better. Be with Jesus and behold that he is better. If it's all about Jesus, then we have to know who he is rightly if we're going to follow him rightly. See, before we start behaving, we got to start beholding. We want to skip ahead to the doing part. God, tell me what I need to do. Let me run around frantically and start doing for you. We need to stop and first behold who Jesus is if we're ever going to behave in the way that God desires for us to behave. Our behavior ought to always be shaped by our beholding. So, in terms of application, let's talk about why this matters. We talked about what it means that Jesus is better, but why does it matter for us? First, I want us to make sure that we never get over the fact that Jesus is supreme in our salvation. Why does it matter that Jesus is better? It matters because we never want to get over the fact that Jesus is supreme in our salvation. He's better. And what that means quite simply is this: that Jesus is better than religion. Jesus is better than religion. Religion is spelled D-O, but the writer of Hebrews is showing us that in the gospel, it is spelled D-O-N-E. It is done. It's finished. So when persons at Mercy Hill get baptized, we ask them two questions. The first question, though, is this: do you believe that Jesus Christ has done everything necessary to save you? The emphasis there is on everything. Not most things, but everything. See, I think functionally sometimes we can think that Jesus is the one that saved us, which means that he got us in the door, but we're the ones that have to keep ourselves together in order to stay at the party. So if you're a Christian, the temptation will, I think to some degree or another, it will be to run back to trying to earn our standing before God. To try to earn something from God. We will all think at different points and act at different points in our life as if this whole thing called salvation and sanctification, as if it were up to us. You see, in our sin, our hearts, like we talked about earlier, our hearts are wired for control. We want control. We like to know how we're measuring up. We like to see our proverbial Christian scorecard in order to see how we're measuring up. You say, okay, well, what does that mean? How do I know if maybe I'm trying to take back control? How do I know if maybe I'm trying to do for God, trying to earn something from him? This is not an exhaustive list, but these are some things in my life that I try to keep a check on. That when I'm doing these things, I think what it's showing me is that I think it's about me and what I can do for God instead of realizing it's what God has done for me. The first is I think we can play this comparison game. We begin looking at other believers in our life and we begin to kind of see how we're stacking up as compared to them. Or maybe we allow ourselves to sit in guilt. I'm not talking about conviction. I'm not talking about this idea that, man, we're convicted over our sin. I'm talking about this idea we begin to identify ourselves as a failure. We begin to stake all of our identity in the fact that we are sinners and we just kind of wallow in that guilt. Or maybe we stop thinking about God as a loving father and we begin to think about him more as a brutal taskmaster. This idea of God loving me and cherishing me and wanting to be with me, we don't think of God in that way. We begin to think of God more as do this, do that, don't do this, don't do that. Maybe we've turned our Christian life into another to-do list. We got all of our other to-do lists that we run around doing during the week, and Christianity is just another one of those. It's just a bunch of boxes that we check throughout the week. I think these are good indications in our life. Maybe your joy has been turned to bitterness. These are things that we can use to check and to see, man, am I putting the emphasis back on my doing and not on what Christ has done? But listen, if you are not a Christian, maybe you were here today. Maybe you said, you know what, part of my New Year's resolution is I'm going to jump back into church. And you're here, and if you're honest with yourself, you would say, you know what, I'm not a Christian. I realize that in my own life. I'm not a follower of Jesus. The fact that Jesus is better means that there is nothing that you can do to earn God's love. There's no resolution that you can make this year to try to clean yourself up to be better that's going to put you back into relationship with God. But Jesus, see what the gospel says is that Jesus, he lived a perfect life that you were meant to live. See, the gospel says that we were separated from God. We were enemies of God. We were on the outside. We could not clean ourselves up. But Jesus is the one who lived the perfect life that you were meant to live, and he died the death that you deserve to die in order to put you back into right relationship with God. And maybe this year, before you try to do anything for God, that you would believe that God has done it all for you by sending his son. And so before you try and start cleaning up your life, would you first just behold that because of the blood of Jesus, you can be made clean? Maybe you would believe that for the first time today. I pray that you would. I pray that you would start off this year believing in that truth, that there is nothing that you could do to earn God's love for you, but rather Jesus has done it, and you would put your faith and trust in him today. The second thing by way of application is this, that we have to also remember that Jesus is supreme in our growth. We call this sanctification. That's the word that we use. But really what it means is growth, that Jesus is supreme in our growth. Let me make an honest confession here. My heart is sneaky. I realize this about myself. I think it quickly runs back to these less than better options. I think that Jesus is better, but I know my heart, and it runs back to these less than better options. I say that Jesus is better, but I think a lot of times in my life I settle for much less than substitutes. Here's what I mean by that. I say that Jesus is better, but I quickly look to relationships in my life, my spouse, maybe my friends, to fill those relational needs that I know that only Christ can give me. I say that Jesus is better, but I often go to money and to finances in search of comfort and security that I know is only found in Christ. I say that Jesus is better, but I often desire to look for my identity in my work. Instead, in the name child that Jesus has bestowed upon me. I think about this analogy I read. It's about a dog who goes on a walk with his master. And the dog goes on a walk, and he's got this nice big fat bone in his mouth, and he's super proud. And so he goes on this walk, and they come to the edge of a pond. The dog looks into the pond, and the dog sees another dog looking back at him. And this dog also has a bone in his mouth, and so this dog becomes agitated. He wants the bone that is in that dog's mouth. And so what does the dog do? Well, he jumps in to fetch the bone in the other dog's mouth, only to lose the one that he actually has in his mouth, to chase after the illusion of something that never existed in the first place. See, would we stop chasing after the illusion of something better and turn to the reality that Christ is better? Jesus is enough. That's what Hebrews 1 is trying to teach us. It doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter how long we chase after it. What we need to realize is that Jesus is better. I'll close with this. It's a familiar story. Maybe some of you have heard it. It's about a guy named Horatio Spafford, wrote a very famous hymn. Horatio Spafford was a businessman back in the 1800s. And in fact, he actually had gone through and experienced a lot of tragedy in his life. And in 1871, he lost pretty much all of his money in the Great Chicago Fire. And then several years later, 2 years later, actually, all four of his daughters were killed when they were crossing over the Atlantic to go to England. His wife was also on board as well. She wasn't killed. But you think about this guy who lost all of his money, and then 2 years later lost four of his daughters, tragically. And a year later, he was traveling across the Atlantic, and when he came to the place where it was believed that the ship went down, where four of his daughters perished, he penned these words: "When peace like a river attendeth my way, when sorrows like sea billows roll, whatever my lot, thou hast taught me to say, it is well with my soul." How does someone do that? How does someone believe that in the midst of such great tragedy in their life? Well, I think the book of Hebrews is showing us how we do that. It's helping us to see that, man, life is not going to be comfortable. It's not a promise that you are not going to have major struggles in your life or that everything is going to be easy. What the book of Hebrews shows us, what it promises us, is that in the midst of life's greatest victories, in the valley of life's greatest difficulties, that Jesus is better. And I hope we will see that and believe that and behold that at the start of this year. Let's go ahead and pray together. Father, I thank you so much, Father, that you, through your word, show us, Father, that Jesus is better. And that, Father, you have sent him. God, we have been reminded over this season, Emmanuel with us. God, Emmanuel, that you are with us, that you have sent your Son. And God, that he is better, that we have life in him. Father, I pray for those that maybe have never put their faith and trust in you. God, would they do that? Father, would they do that today? Would they believe that you have done everything necessary to save them? And Father, for those of us that have, would we never get over that beautiful truth? Father, you have done everything. I pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen.